The scope of the work was to reinstate the roof and reinstate the damage as a consequence of the fire and the chimney, make that safe and consolidate that. Beyond that, it was to reinstate the finishes, and the finishes exhibited a wide range of damage. The external envelope, there were elements of lost and structure that had been taken away at some point, so we advocated that we would reinstate some of the lost items as part of the restoration. So there's a lot of material testing and analysis of finishes that we had to do on this project to ensure that any new material would seamlessly integrate into the old.
I think the key aspiration was really one of invisibility. Peter Womersley and Bernard Klein both had a shared attitude of this idea of being connected to nature and of trying to hide services away from view. We were inspired by that.
The ceiling was the key feature that had to really not stand out as being different, and we were at pains not to lose all of the original fabric. We wanted to retain as much of that as possible. It is imperceptible, you wouldn't know the difference.
It's a brand home for Diageo and specifically for the Johnny Walker whiskey brand, an underused 4-storey warehouse structure that has expanded and altered and adapted the sort of industrial demands. But it was surrounded by a series of structures that they weren't bringing a lot to the site, and a series of 3 clusters of structures were then proposed to be removed, and that then allowed the landscape of East Lothian into this distillery. The buildings were able to breathe. This 4-storey warehouse, it was a sea of cast iron that we really wanted to sort of display. So it was something we wanted to retain, clean up, celebrate, but also when we brought in new materials like stainless steel cladding, is bringing some kind of colour, again some texture to it that we felt sat at home with all the Victorian elements, but also contrasted it in a sort of a really simple and strong way.
We recognised that the church interior was not suitable for the requirements we had for the 21st century. So we looked to make the space more flexible. The principal requirement to enable that flexibility was to remove the pews from the church. We put a new oak floor down. We extended the chancel area of the church so that there was a much closer linkage. Fantastic new lighting.
It's Romanesque revival, and most Victorian churches are Gothic revival. We wanted to maintain that character and language. A huge amount of effort went to make sure that we hid the services, and therefore most of the installations, they were designed more as pieces of furniture. You could see the changes that were being made, and the changes are sensitive to the scale and to the architectural language, but when you go in, you can tell what's new and what's historic.
In the lane, it's probably the one that was the least renovated. It had some really awful PVC windows. It had lost its original form, and it had been divided into 2 interlocking apartments. We were wanting to make these 2 flats into one new home, and so there was a modest approach externally. Where the old coach house opening was, we restored that opening. We had a huge glazing panelling there, enhancing the exterior and taking it back to the original coach house opening. Internally, it was basically to completely rationalise the space, horizontally, vertically, but also introducing light. The upper hall leads to 3 spacious bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, new tall hardwood windows. On the ground floor, a large open plan living space was formed with glazed doors opening directly onto the garden. There was a very small basement down there, but once we started taking wall linings down, we found there's actually another compartment next door. So then we adapted our design, and it actually became a really pleasant sort of snug. The earliest brief, they were looking for an extension, an additional space. In the end, we actually found it, but we didn't know it was there in the beginning.